She screamed at the royal guard's horse. Not once, not by accident. She stood inches from the reins and yelled. So why didn't the guard react? Why didn't the horse flinch? And when he finally did speak, why did the entire square fall silent? This wasn't just a breach of etiquette. It was a direct challenge to centuries of ceremonial discipline. And what came next? 1 line, 7 words. That changed the mood of everyone watching. Now, before we reveal the full story, first hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because this moment, it didn't need applause, it needed silence, and it got it. The sun hit Whitehall just right that day. Not the harsh, blinding summer heat that drove people indoors, but the rare, flattering kind. The kind that made Union Jacks ripple like silk and made Horse Guards Parade glow like a painting. Tourists gathered early. Some had read about it in guidebooks. Others had just followed the crowd. But all of them were drawn by the same thing, the mounted royal guards. They weren't like anything back home. That's what Americans always said. Real horses, real armor, real men in red coats and bearskin helmets who didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't talk, just stood silent, statuesque. It didn't matter that some didn't understand the tradition. The visual alone was enough to command attention. By noon, the courtyard was full. Elderly couples leaned on canes to get a better look. Children perched on shoulders. A row of teenagers took turns posing with outstretched arms, pretending to hold the guards in the frame. The sound of hooves on stone punctuated the air as the mounted sentries took position, 2 of them stationed beside the arch, unmoving but unmistakably alive. And then there was Meghan, American early 30s, sharp bob haircut and oversized sunglasses, dressed in beige activewear that was already picking up the London dust. She'd been vlogging since Trafalgar Square, all of it for her travel channel, which she introduced loudly to whoever would listen as Meg's Real Moments. Her phone was in a collapsible selfie stick, complete with a tiny ring light, and she had no intention of filming anything she couldn't star in. "Okay, you guys, so I made it," she said, turning in a slow circle with Buckingham Palace in the distance and the parade ground spread out behind her. "These are the famous royal guards on horses. And yeah, they're cool and all, but nobody tells you how impossible it is to get a decent shot. Seriously, they're not even looking in the direction of the crowd." She laughed at her own frustration and kept walking, weaving toward the thin rope that separated tourists from the guards. A sign, black letters on white, hung neatly from a post nearby. "Do not touch the horses. Do not obstruct the guard." Another officer stood off to the side, quietly watching the flow of people. He didn't move, didn't intervene, just remained a calm presence, ready in case anyone got too bold. Meghan approached the rope, phone already recording. "I'm going to try to get closer," she muttered, more to the camera than to anyone else. "Everyone's being super precious about space. But how are you supposed to get a photo with the actual horse in frame if you're stuck back here?" A British couple nearby glanced at each other but said nothing. A little girl in a sundress looked up from her ice cream and pointed. "Mummy, why's that lady talking to the horse?" Her mother gently steered her away. The mounted guard didn't move, neither did the horse. A beautiful black stallion, flanks gleaming in the sun, eyes calm, trained for this kind of noise, this kind of crowd. But Meghan wasn't looking at the horse. She was adjusting her angles, trying to frame herself just right. Face lit, guard in the background, horse head partially visible. "Okay, I think I've got it now," she said breathlessly. "Hold still, buddy." She meant the horse, and the moment she said it, even though she laughed, there was already something off in the air, a ripple of tension, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the breeze itself had decided to hold its breath. Because Meghan wasn't done yet, and the guard hadn't moved a muscle. Meghan leaned in a little closer, pushing the toe of her trainer right up against the rope. Then, like it wasn't even there, she stepped over it. It wasn't dramatic. No running, no shouting, just a quiet, entitled sort of motion, like a person reaching past a counter to grab something they think they're owed. The tourist behind her shifted uncomfortably, some instinctively lifting their phones, not quite sure if they were about to witness something funny or something serious. She stopped about 4 feet from the horse, too close by any standard. From that angle, the guard's polished boots were nearly at eye level. His hands were still on the reins, posture straight, face unreadable beneath the shadow of the bearskin hat. Meghan raised her phone again. "This is so much better," she whispered, crouching slightly to fit the entire upper body of the horse and rider into her frame. Like, sorry to everyone watching, but this angle is the only way you can tell he's real. Otherwise, you'd think it was just a statue. The horse twitched, not in fear, not even in protest. Just a subtle shift of weight, the way horses do when they're aware of something moving too close. Its left ear rotated back, then forward again, scanning. Megan instantly jerked back. Ugh! She hissed. Seriously? She shook her head, like the animal had done it on purpose. The phone stayed rolling. In the background, a woman's voice spoke up gently. Excuse me, love, maybe best not to crowd him. The sign. Megan turned. It's fine, I'm not touching anything, okay? Her tone wasn't loud, but it was dismissive enough to end the conversation. The woman backed off, muttering something under her breath as she returned to her husband's side. A few more heads turned toward the commotion. Two young men in Liverpool shirts exchanged amused looks. One of them nudged the other. Bloody Americans, he muttered with a grin. Megan didn't hear it. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Her focus was entirely on capturing what she kept calling the shot. She repositioned, taking a half step forward again. The rope line was now fully behind her. A clear violation. But the guard still didn't react. He looked exactly as he had before. Immovable, indifferent, invulnerable. The horse shifted again, a more deliberate motion this time. It turned its head slightly to the left, more alert now, its nostrils flaring just once. Oh, come on! Megan snapped. You were perfect, like 1 second ago. She dropped her phone arm for a moment and placed her free hand on her hip, exasperated. Pose was familiar, the kind of body language people used when arguing with a cashier or a waiter. But here, it looked absurd. She was posturing against a horse. Behind her, the quiet tension began to spread. A boy in a school uniform whispered to his older brother, "Is she allowed to be that close?" His brother didn't answer. Another tourist, this one an older man with a Nikon camera strapped across his chest, leaned over to a nearby officer. "You going to intervene, mate?" The officer didn't respond. His eyes remained locked on Megan, not because he wasn't concerned, but because he knew what the mounted guard had been trained to do. The moment would manage itself. Megan lifted her phone again. "Okay," she said, her voice now clipped and more performative. "Let's try this again. This time, maybe the horse doesn't twitch like he's got fleas." More people were watching now, some with curiosity, some with quiet disbelief, but none with laughter. Because for all her theatrics, something about the situation felt like it had passed the point of funny. And the guard still hadn't moved, still hadn't blinked, and that was starting to unnerve even Megan. But she didn't stop. Not yet. The shift wasn't sudden. It crept in, like a storm cloud, drifting unnoticed until it darkened the entire sky. Megan turned to face the crowd now, not just the horse. Her phone was still recording, but it wasn't about the shot anymore. It was about her performance. "So this is what I get," she said, pacing slightly in the narrow space between the rope and the horse. "I fly all the way from LA. I wait in this dusty square for nearly 2 hours, and the horse can't even stay still for 10 seconds. Her voice had risen a notch. Not yelling, not yet, but theatrical. People further back were starting to drift closer, pulled in by the tone, not cheering, just watching. Guard didn't flinch. His grip on the reins was unchanged. The horse hadn't moved again, trained to ignore everything that didn't matter. But Megan wasn't interested in what mattered. She gestured broadly to the space around her, like presenting an exhibit in a courtroom. I mean, seriously, this is what the UK spends taxpayer money on. Stone-faced guys in dead bear hats and horses with ADH. The words hung in the air longer than she expected. A few nervous chuckles, a couple of exchanged glances. No one responded, and somehow that silence, so complete, so undisturbed, only fueled her. "You'd think they'd at least train them to look at the camera," she added with a half laugh, aiming it toward her phone. "Guess dignity doesn't come with basic media literacy." A child nearby, no more than 6, tugged at their dad's sleeve. "Why's the lady yelling at the horse?" he asked in a small voice. The father didn't answer, just gently moved him a few steps away. Megan spun back toward the guard, suddenly animated again. "Are you even allowed to talk?" she asked loudly. "Like, what if the horse bites someone? Do you just wait for it to make a royal statement?" Still nothing. No movement. No shift. No response. The sheer lack of reaction started to unravel something in her. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially not in public, especially not by someone in uniform. Her followers were probably still watching the live stream. She couldn't let it fizzle out, not like this. "You know what?" she said, voice hardening. "Fine. Be a statue, but don't act like I'm the problem when your royal pet's messing up everyone's photos." She moved to the side, blocking the horse's flank now, still not touching, but too close, much too close. The horse, ever composed, simply flicked its ear once. That was all it took. Megan jumped slightly and threw up her hands in frustration. "Again?" She turned toward the crowd, backlit by the golden light of early afternoon. "God, this horse is so rude!" Her voice echoed against the stone walls of the archway. And this time, it echoed a little too long. People stopped pretending not to watch. Phones came up. Not in applause, but in apprehension. The vibe had shifted. Tourists began whispering to one another, exchanging small frowns, subtle shakes of the head. One teenage girl near the front lowered her phone mid-record. "I don't think she's supposed to be that close," she murmured. "No kidding," her friend replied. "This is going to go viral for all the wrong reasons." Megan, emboldened by the sound of her own voice and blind to the change in atmosphere, kept going. "I get it, you're supposed to look royal or whatever," she said, gesturing to the guard now. "But maybe update the training manual to include a little basic awareness. You're not guarding a palace, you're blocking a selfie." A sharp inhale from somewhere in the crowd followed that line. The officer in the corner didn't move, but he narrowed his eyes slightly. Because Megan wasn't just being obnoxious now. She was crossing into dangerous territory, but she didn't notice. She was too busy lining up her next line, too busy fueling her own spiral, and just behind her, perfectly still and silent, the guard remained like an anchor dropped in still water. That stillness? It was starting to hum, the kind of hum that builds not in the ears but in the chest, because everyone watching knew what she didn't. That stillness always precedes something. And it was coming, soon. It happened faster than anyone expected. But somehow, it also felt like it had been building for hours. Megan turned once more to the horse, clearly gearing up for a final clip. Her phone was still rolling, although now it dangled slightly in her hand, forgotten in favour of whatever spontaneous tantrum was about to unfold. She adjusted her sunglasses, pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and shifted closer. The horse didn't move. It didn't have to. Its left ear flicked once, barely anything. A normal motion. The kind no trained horse handler would ever consider unusual. But for Megan, sweaty, annoyed, and filmed from half a dozen angles she didn't control, it was the last straw. She let out a full-throated yell. "Stop moving!" It wasn't even a scream in the emotional sense, not rage or fear or panic, just volume, sharp, indignant volume, like she was speaking to a faulty machine, the kind of shout people reserve for malfunctioning ATMs or car horns that won't shut off. The sound echoed off the courtyard stones like a dropped plate. Conversation stopped, movement paused, and then the royal guard moved, not his arms, not his posture, just his head, turning slightly toward her, precisely, deliberately. His voice followed one breath later, low, measured, perfectly audible to everyone within 20 yards. "Step away from the king's horse." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't repeat himself. He didn't look at her twice. And then, after a single heartbeat, "That is your only warning." That was all. 7 words, and silence followed like a curtain drop. The stillness in the square changed, not paused, changed. As if some invisible weight had settled over the area, even the horse, sensing the shift, exhaled slowly, nostrils flaring once. The crowd stood frozen. Phones were still raised, but no one spoke. No one moved, even the street sounds from beyond the arches. Distant engines, murmured tourist chatter, seemed to recede. Megan's face went pale. Not embarrassed, not even quite afraid, just suspended, like someone suddenly unsure what world they were standing in. Because there was something in that voice that her camera couldn't flatten. Not anger, not performance, authority. It didn't come from volume. It came from clarity. The way every word landed like it had been forged in stone. It was the voice of someone who had stood in palace gates during bomb threats and kept their posture. Who had watched tourists scream inches from his face without blinking. Who had been taught, drilled, conditioned not to react. But when he did react, you knew it mattered. Meghan's phone slowly lowered to her side. Her sunglasses slipped an inch down her nose, and for once she didn't adjust them. Her feet moved, backward, not fast, not panicked, but without hesitation. She stepped away from the horse, over the rope she'd ignored, and back into the crowd. 2 steps, 3. Then she stood still, surrounded now by tourists who wouldn't meet her eyes. A child pointed. Their mother gently took the child's hand and lowered it. A young man in a Barcelona jersey whispered to his friend, "Did you hear that?" "He didn't even yell," the friend whispered back. "Nope, didn't have to." Back near the edge of the barrier, the same British couple from before stood together, arms crossed. The man exhaled slowly through his nose. And then someone, maybe the elderly man with the nick on, maybe a local, murmured just loud enough to be heard, "They don't need to raise their voice to be heard." That, somehow, was the final punctuation mark, because no one else spoke. No one else moved. The guard hadn't returned to stillness, because he'd never left it. His body was right back in place, eyes forward, posture untouched. The warning had not broken his discipline, it had reinforced it, and the crowd finally understood what they were looking at. Not a statue, not a prop. A line that should not be crossed. And what happened when someone did? No one told Meghan to leave, and no one needed to. She didn't storm off. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. There was no viral meltdown or second attempt at saving face. She just faded. One step at a time, she moved deeper into the crowd, her phone now at her side, screen dark. For a moment, she lingered behind a family of 4, adjusting her posture like she was just another observer, as if she hadn't been the centre of it all a moment ago. The tourists around her didn't speak to her. They didn't scold her or laugh or gawk. They simply didn't look. That strange collective instinct people get after something serious happens in public, where even strangers agree not to cheapen it. The silence held for a few more seconds, and then gently the square began to breathe again. Children fidgeted. A stroller creaked forward. Somewhere near the back, the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter clicked, quieter than usual. But the energy was different now. Nobody was posing. Nobody dared cross the rope again. Even the tourists who'd arrived late, who hadn't seen the confrontation itself, seemed to pick up on the tension still lingering in the stones. They adjusted their behaviour without knowing why. They stood straighter, kept their distance, held their breath a little longer when walking past the mounted guards. A group of schoolchildren who had been whispering and giggling moments earlier were now whispering for a different reason, not fear, but awe. "Did you hear him?" one boy asked. Another nodded. "I didn't think they ever talked." The guard remained as he had been from the beginning, unshaken, unbothered. His hands still rested neatly at the reins, his shoulders square, his chin level. The horse hadn't flinched either, as if it had always known its rider would handle it. No performance, no extra glance at the crowd, just a return to form. A quiet dignity that filled the space louder than applause ever could. And standing a few feet behind the rope again, Meghan looked different too. Not humiliated, not exactly, just smaller. Her earlier swagger, the exaggerated hand gestures, the fake laughter, the loud commentary, was gone. She wasn't filming anymore, she wasn't narrating, she was just watching, the kind of watching people do when they've been reminded they're not the main character in the room. She tucked her phone into her bag, then folded her arms loosely. Her sunglasses stayed on, but her head stayed low. A beat passed, then another, and the guard, the man who had silenced the entire square with a single sentence, didn't give her so much as a glance. That was what made it so powerful. He hadn't put her in her place. He hadn't needed to. The place had always existed, and she'd simply forgotten where she stood. Now everyone remembered. The people who had been quietly judging her now quietly respected him. Not because he'd embarrassed her, but because he hadn't needed to. And standing near the edge of the scene, arms behind his back, the quiet security officer allowed himself the smallest smile. Nothing smug, nothing cruel, just recognition that the uniform had spoken, and for once everyone had listened. Time resumed its quiet rhythm. The mounted guard remained in position, unmoving as always. The horse's ears twitched once more, then settled. Somewhere in the courtyard, a pigeon fluttered from one windowsill to another. The sound of a double-decker bus drifted in faintly from Whitehall. But inside Horse Guards Parade, everything moved just a little slower now. The ceremony continued. The next rotation of guards began to approach from the far archway. Hooves echoed steadily across the stone, signalling the changeover that happened every hour, every day, rain or shine. It was nothing special to those who worked there, just tradition, routine, but not to the people watching now, because today that tradition had revealed something deeper. The crowd parted slightly to let the incoming guard pass. Megan, still standing near the rope line, didn't raise her phone again. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just stood quietly, sunglasses still on, arms folded loosely across her chest. And when the original guard, the one who had spoken, finally turned to ride out with the others, she saw him again. He didn't look at her, didn't offer a nod or a glare or any acknowledgement at all, but something in the stillness between them felt changed. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just clear. He had done his job. She had learned hers. As the horses disappeared under the archway, a few tourists started to move again. The whispering resumed, but it was quieter now, more reverent than reactive. A pair of college students debated what exactly the guard had said. A French couple murmured about how the British did silence better than sermons. One father quietly told his daughter, "That's what discipline looks like." Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered, but nobody would forget it either. The rope remained where it had always been, a thin, unassuming line. Yet for the rest of that day, not one person crossed it. Not once. Megan didn't linger. A few minutes later, she adjusted her backpack, turned and slowly walked out of the square. There was no exit line, no dramatic pause. She blended into the foot traffic and was gone. But the story had already taken root. It would travel home in whispers, in videos, in quiet retellings over dinner tables and phone calls. We saw something strange today. A woman screamed at the guard's horse, and then the guard spoke, just once. No one would remember her name, but they'd remember his voice. Not because it was loud, but because it was the only one that didn't need to be. What would you have done if you witnessed this moment in person? Do you think the Royal Guard went too far, or not far enough? If you appreciated this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss another Guard Focus moment. And if you know someone who believes in discipline and quiet strength, share this with them now. Our next incredible story is already on your screen. Go ahead and watch that one next, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time.